welcome to the Perspective with Viv podcast. My name is Viv and this is the show. Today's title is Plays and Playwriting with Stan Lai. Stan Lai has been called the major contemporary Asian playwright of his time, perhaps of all time, by Robert Brustein, the best Chinese language playwright and director in the world by the BBC, and Asia's top theatre director by Asia Week. Born in the US and raised in America and Taiwan, Lai earned a PhD from UC Berkeley before launching a groundbreaking career in Taiwan. His 50-plus plays are celebrated across the Chinese-speaking world, including masterpieces such as A Dream Like a Dream and Secret Love in Peach Blossom Land. I love those titles. He's co-founder of the Wuzhen Theatre Festival and Huchang Theatre Village in China. Beautiful. Theatre Above in Shanghai is a venue dedicated to his works. Now, we're going to dive right into the questions. Hi, Stan. Thank you for joining
Hi,
me.
Viv. Hey, it's so nice to be on the podcast with you.
It's a pleasure, honestly. So for me, it's more of an honor because what do you mean I have one of the greatest Asian playwrights
Oh,
of all time on my
please.
podcast? Come on, Stan. Come
Please.
on.
Oh, you
No, we're
want
not
me to
being
bury
modest here.
bury my head under the desk.
No
Yeah.
modesty here.
Oh, no.
Thank
I've
you for
just been
joining
doing it
me.
for a long time. That's all.
Yeah. And you've done like 50 plus plays, which is so
Yeah.
amazing.
Original works, I think, 40 some. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So how did your journey start? Please enlighten us.
Yeah. My journey started, it's how does modern theater start in any modern society? I'm sure in Africa it's you have your own story, but in China and in the Chinese world, our story starts you have to take from 1949 when the Chinese Civil War ended, and then 2 million people who lost the war came to Taiwan, where my family was. And after that, there was like 40 years of just, sort of like a Cold War where not only there was no activity between China and Taiwan, but there was no cultural activity within China or Taiwan, meaning that no new plays were being written. And when I was growing up as a kid in Taiwan, we were under martial law. So there was not at all encouraged to do anything creative, So there just wasn't the whole tradition of modern theater it just snapped. So what I did was in the 80s, I had a crazy idea, which was there's no theater here, so let's see what we can do. And it just so happened that I had gotten my PhD at Berkeley and was invited to come back to Taiwan to teach at a newly founded school. And that's why I had some sort of confidence in it, because it was new. Otherwise, if it was the old like martial law school, I wouldn't be teaching anything but propaganda. But this new school seemed to have some new hope. And so I came to teach. But when I came to teach, I realized I didn't have any teaching materials, So Viv, it's like if you want to learn acting, I teach you acting, but I need a script, right? You need a script to be able to learn the lines and everything. So there weren't any. There were very, very few. There was some translated works like Shakespeare, but you don't want to train a young actor with Shakespeare. That's not necessarily the right way to do it. So I was in a fix. And what I did was I started using improvisation as a tool to train actors and at the same time build plays. So we built plays through improvisation and performed for the public. And the thing is, they liked it, and so ever since later I started working with professional television actors. There were no professional theater actors because there was no
Wow.
professional theater. And the first play that we did was a huge success that was beyond any of our expectations. And so that's what happened. It's a story, lots of artists work a long time to have a success, and my success was the first time, and it's gone ever since. So, basically just about every year I have a new play being performed. And this year alone, I just counted and I sort of scared myself. I have 14 plays being performed around the Chinese world just this year. So in my own direction, so my own productions. So, it's just nonstop work ever since the day I started working in Taiwan, working and making my first play, which was over 40 years ago.
That is such a remarkable story.
You asked it, so I gave it to you in a real nutshell, Viv, in a real
I
nutshell.
love that. You see, the beauty of your story, if you ask me, is that it's sort of like fate. you had a certain circumstances with which you're operating in. You had a certain obstacle, which was we don't have materials. And from there, you it's kind of like something awakening in you to give birth to improv plays. And from there, you have started this whole journey as a playwright, really, really influencing culture, adding to culture, creating works that touch people and impact people just from that situation. And I think it's important for people to know that a lot of times our greatest talents or greatest gifts or our purpose comes from situations where we feel restricted, where you said martial law was stopping you from, really fully expressing yourself. But within that space that you were in, that new school, you were able to create new material for the students to interact with.
Totally. Viv, I think this is a very important point, even though it sounds like a small point. But honestly, I really think that whenever, if you have a plan and then something happens that seems to distract the plan or totally upend the plan, you really want to consider it carefully because it may be something benevolent. It may be someone
Mm,
trying to tell you,
beautiful.
hey, you should change your plan. Don't
Yes,
necessarily have to really be obsessed with what you're doing and the way you're doing it. It's a point I make
exactly.
in the book that I recently released called the CreativitRy. And I
Mm,
say that really because we come with obstacles all the time. Every time there's an obstacle. And people think that compromise is a dirty word, but
mm,
as an artist, and particularly for me, I'm not like a painter. A painter doesn't need to compromise. But as a playwright, as a director, we're compromising all the time. It's like I go into a theater and there's no light here, or the smoke machine doesn't work correctly, or and instead of complaining, suddenly I've come to learn that you listen to that and say, "Oh, are they telling you that maybe you should not be using this certain technique in your directing for this particular play?"
mm,
Sometimes, of course, sometimes it really is a random thing, but often, particularly in the creative process, when you come up with something like, for me, it would be like if an actor who is committed to the play suddenly says, "I'm sorry, I can't do it." And you can
mm.
say, "Well, that's the end of the world, we can't do this." But on the other hand, you might be saying someone else can do it better. It could be that someone is trying to tell you that someone else can do it better. That's happened to me a lot. Yeah,
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to talk about your book, but I have to talk to you about creativity first. Now, what
sure.
is your perspective of creativity? And how has that changed you as a person? Because I
Mm.
do believe I'm an artist as well. Creativity changes you when you tap into it.
Totally. Well, the first thing I believe very strongly that we all are very creative, every single person. And the problem is that we have been blocked from our own creativity. And this happens during childhood and then all throughout adult life. You block, and then in fact you get to a point where you start blocking your own children's creativity without knowing. It's we create a barrier between ourselves and creativity. And this is something that you really have to work on to unlock that creativity. And what frustrated me for many years was I'm a playwright and director, and I've been doing a lot of work in the theater. And I also had been teaching at the university level for over 2 decades. And I never thought that I could teach a student to be creative. I had always been frustrated by the fact that I never felt I could teach creativity to the student. In other words, like Viv, I could teach you to be a competent director,
Mm.
but how could I teach you to be a creative director? Okay. So I never felt satisfied that I couldn't do that. And then I thought that wasn't part of my job description, nor was it the part of, my own teachers, their job description was just to give you the methods and the tools to become an artist. And whether you become an artist or not, that's up to you.
Mm.
And I thought that made sense. And then for many years I was nagged at, no, that doesn't make sense. And one day I was in India on a pilgrimage to Bodh Gaya, and I sort of had a flash in my mind. There's a Buddhist saying in the scriptures that says, to progress on the path, you need to have two things. One is called wisdom, and one
Mm.
is called method. And I thought, I've read that many, many times, and I thought, yeah, that certainly makes sense. But suddenly I thought this makes sense to creativity, and this makes sense to all sorts of education, which means what we learn, let's say let's say I'm teaching you music and I'm teaching you how to play the piano. So you're learning the scales and everything. The real wisdom of music is not in those notes and those scales. You need those notes and scales because that's your method. But what is the wisdom? How can you play Bach? How can you play, jazz? You need wisdom for that. Bear with me for a moment, Viv, because this is going somewhere. Okay. So I went to the dictionary because I thought, wait a minute, nobody teaches wisdom. My own university, nobody teaches wisdom. I thought, is there any department of wisdom or graduate studies in wisdom anywhere in the world? And there isn't. So I checked Webster's dictionary, and the definition of wisdom was called wisdom is the quality of being wise. Yeah, I mean, what a cop out, right? How can you say that? How can you say that in a dictionary? How can you say that in a dictionary? So I checked wise, and wise said characterized by wisdom. So it looped, it was
Yeah,
looping. What? These guys, Webster
they're not
doesn't know
breaking
what
it down.
wisdom is. So I thought this was very curious. And so I went to my friend, the head of the philosophy department in National Taiwan University, Professor Ling. And I said, isn't this strange that have we lost the definition of wisdom? Who is responsible for wisdom these days? And he thought about it and he said, particularly in democracies, the individual is responsible for learning their own wisdom and defining what wisdom is. And the problem with modern societies is that people no longer understand that this is their responsibility. And so they just sort of go with whatever, and so nobody tells anybody because wisdom in the end has to do with how you want to live your life and what you think is worthwhile and what makes you happy in the end. So if you're not thinking about those things, you're just going with the flow and whatever everyone else says is good about life, that's what you believe in. Seriously, if you're an artist, then you miss half of that equation if you're not thinking about it. And that's what spurred me to develop this whole system where creativity must be learned in two steps. It doesn't happen in one place. Basically, that's my take on creativity. One more thing I'd like to say is that many of us believe that creative artists are like geniuses, and so when the inspiration comes, bang, it's like the muses really exist and they come to you in a dream or whatever, and they give you the idea to do whatever. I don't know how if that happens to you, Viv, but I thought to really understand creativity, let's see if we can slow down that moment when
Hmm.
the inspiration, it's like if you're watching a soccer match, and then, if we want to make sure who who the ball went off bounds on, then you have to slow down and do instant replay and you see frame by frame what happens to the ball. Now, in creativity, my own experience, I can only speak for myself, but I really see that when you slow down those moments, you see that nothing comes in from outside. It's all something coming in from inside. It's like creativity is not an infusion, not an external infusion, but an internal extraction. So what
Whoa.
happens is, yeah, your mind is extracting files that you've stored inside yourself that you think somehow, some mechanism in you is storing files that you think are important. And then in the moment of inspiration, the mind grabs files that have nothing to do with each other, perhaps, and puts them together in a new file. And that's your creative project.
That's such a beautiful way to put it, honestly.
Making sense?
Yes, very much making sense. And I will tell you what I like the most that you said because I have experienced those times. As a creative myself, I call it channeling. Like it just comes out of
Mm,
nowhere, this thing from
mm,
my
there you go.
subconscious. But it's
I
from,
love it. I
yeah,
love it. Yeah.
exactly. But I love that I called it inner extraction. It's not coming from something
Mm,
external, it's from something
right.
inside of us. It's like, how do I explain this? It's like it could be something subconsciously, it could be something intuitive, but it's something that is moving through you or wants to move through you. So it comes to you for you to channel and express. That's how I see it.
And that's great. I love how you said that because when you say it comes from nowhere, that's what you want to explore. Where is that nowhere?
Mm.
Is that nowhere outside or inside? And so when that actually happens, what the point I want to make is that you need space for that to happen. The nowhere is the space. So for any inspiration, I mean, the cluttered mind is if your mind is so cluttered and you're thinking about so much and you're listening to music and you're thinking about 100 different things and you're doing 5 different things, how can you possibly have the space for any inspiration. So you need space. And if you have the tools to clear your mind and make space, then that nowhere is exactly where that space is. And
Fair
anything can
enough.
happen there.
I like that. Okay. I want to know more about this making space for the nowhere. How do you break it down
Yeah.
to students when you talk about that? Because it's really a good thing. It's like making way for you to understand the source of your inspiration as opposed to just interacting with it immediately. It's like taking a breath and allowing it to
Right.
unfold. Is that what you mean? How do you approach that?
Well, yeah, first thing I need to let my students understand that the full glass cannot hold water. You can't add anything into that. If you have a beverage on a full glass, you can't add anything there. So if you want to create something from that glass, you need to empty it. So if they understand that, then you start working on your own mind and you say, "Can you quiet down now and just listen to your own mind and see how it's just like streaming. It's like a streaming podcasts of like 100 different podcasts at the same time. It's our minds are the most incredible streaming device in the world. So how do you start turning off some of those channels? And just by saying that, many of my students are able to say, "Oh, I see. Yeah, there really are some really unnecessary channels that are streaming in my mind. And yeah, I can find a way to turn them off." And when they get to a point where sufficient noise is reduced, they can see, yeah, I have a calmness, I have a space. And in that space, things can happen. Because if you don't have the space, nothing can happen.
So nice, so true. And I don't know why, but the book The Artist's Way comes to mind. Have you ever read that book? What do you
I
think in
have,
relation to your work?
I came across it a few years ago. Yeah, Julia Cameron, I believe her name was.
Yes, I
Yeah, and
think
it's a
so.
very, very well respected book. I don't recall too many details. I do think it is everything I read about it, I really felt inspired and
Mm,
felt the sincerity. And I would like to say that my book is different.
mm.
Of course, every single book is different. It tackles the actual question of creativity itself. You know, it's not like I think Julia's book, from my recollection of it, is very inspiring to the creative person. But if you're not creative at all to begin with, how do you
Hmm.
become creative? And that's
Interesting.
where I come in.
Okay. Thanks for that. Just before I ask you more
I
about
don't
your
know if I'm
book,
right or not. I'm not sure if I'm right or
we'll
not.
see. But for me, I think what I took as a similarity was that in Julia's book, she talks about something called free write, how when you wake up, you should just like write freely. And when you spoke about making that space for inspiration, having that void, I just thought that it was similar because in that moment of free write early in the morning, where you're just channeling and writing pages and you're not really thinking, you are creating space for inspiration to come through. That's my perspective
Yeah.
on that. Yeah.
Well, in a way that free writing is taking out your garbage, and
Mm.
then you're
Making more
creating the
space
space
for
there.
that. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about your book then. So
Sure.
what inspired you to create this book and why has it been something that you feel the need to share with artists or non-artists, just people, for them to understand the concept of creativity?
Right. Well, after that experience in India, I went back to Taipei where I was teaching and working, and I had some graduate students, and I said, "Okay, let's have class in a tea house." And I bought tea for them, and I quietly explained everything to them, and they seemed so inspired by the fact that they started to understand the creative process itself, and that they needed so much to work on wisdom, which is what they had a lot of methods, but without wisdom, you can't even choose the right topic you want to write about if you're a writer. You see what I'm saying? It's like I use a way of talking about creativity as creativity is the posing of a question and then the answering your own question. So you make the question and you make the answer.
Mm.
So how simple or how difficult is the question depends on your wisdom. So if you're going to write a play about what's happening in Ukraine today, you can take 100 different angles on that. But if you have the wisdom, you will choose the angle that will give the most benefit to the most people who are going to see this play. It's like, yeah, if you want to, if you we can choose any topic, like you're in Lagos, and so what are the issues that are pressing right now? I mean, as an artist, you would like to tackle those issues, but anybody can tackle those issues. It depends
Mm.
on, do you have the wise mind to tackle the issue with the right perspective, or the right way of doing it, and that it can resonate. Your work can resonate for the most people. So that's why I started working with my students, and later after they graduated, they said, "We want to continue working with you." And I said, "Sure." I said, "When I have the time, come on over." So we would have these unannounced classes at my house. And we would just have tea and coffee, and we would just talk about creativity. And so then the book came in my mind, and I said, I'm going to write this because I think I do have something to offer to the world, because it's not every day that you get an insight into how to teach creativity. It's not like teaching directing, not like teaching playwriting. We have many, many ways to teach that, but creativity itself, and it's something not just for artists, it's for anyone. So my book on creativity in Chinese was published in 2006. The name of the book in Chinese is 创意学. It's a made-up word, and it means something like creativology or whatever. I don't know how you would say it. When I finally, after 19 years, I've made this book into English, and in the meantime, in the
Mm.
Chinese version, believe it or not, Viv, it's sold over 1 million copies. So it's,
Oh.
I mean, yeah. And so it's not just artists, it's like people from all walks of life, including many, many people in the computers and IT, gaming, design, all sorts of people, businessmen. I have an endorsement from Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, and
Oh.
he read the, yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Wow.
yeah, a friend of his said, "You have to see a play by Stan Lai called The Village." And he said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And they're so busy. His friend said, "You have to come. I have got your tickets. I'm just going to abduct you to come to the theater and see this play."
Hmm.
So he went, and he sat in the back, meaning to leave in 5 minutes because he had meetings and stuff like that. But he stayed for the whole 3.5 hours. And
Whoa.
later he reached out to me, and we had a long conversation about that play. He started to realize how important creativity is for his own company. Uh, After it was published, finally everyone says, "Let's get into the English," and I said, "Sure, sure." And it took 19 years, and it actually took
Wow.
5 years of actually doing it. 5 years, and I didn't do a straight translation because I know that to translate, as you see, I work in Chinese, but my English is also very fluent. It's like being fluent in English, then you know that you can't just translate something and expect people to understand it. There's something cultural about language, and it's not just words. So it took me 5 years to put it into English. And so here it is. And I use the name CreativitRy, which I say rhymes with chemistry and also sorcery, because we're sorcerers.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I love the title.
You're talking about the nowhere place, the channeling, and in a way, that is at the whole center, the crux of creativity is this whole, we're sorcerers. We transform things. It's like, if you're good, let's say, I mean, as artists, what's the difference between, let's say, craft and art?
Hmm.
Because I have the utmost respect for craftsmen, but when does craft become art? And to me, that's the moment when something has a transformational
Yeah.
aspect to it.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that profound answer. I am so jealous of your students because I really know that if you were my teacher, my creativity would be on a different level. Even, when you spoke about wisdom, I can already see the wisdom in the words that you express. So imagine then you fueling it into your teachings and directing it at your students. I'm sure they're learning so much. They've learned so much and they've evolved so much creatively. So yes, I just wanted to tell you that I'm jealous, especially having a teacher
Oh
who would
no, it's
like
never too late.
say,
It's never too
really,
late.
it's never too late. Okay, I'll take you up on
Yes.
that because honestly, I'm
Okay.
creative and I love, in fact,
Seriously.
okay, we have so much to talk about because yes, there's so many things you do that I'm like, if I learned, I would be so much better at what I'm doing now. But we'll get into it. I love the concept of the book. I love that, it's something that you decided to translate into English, but it's already had so much impact in as its original version. It's something that people from all walks of life can read, which is what I like. It's very accessible for everybody because creativity isn't just expressed through art, it's expressed through everything. So I like that you said that
Yes.
the person who stopped by your play, but only wanted
Mhm.
to stay for a few minutes, said that they could also see
Mhm.
how they could use it for their business, and it's not like they're an artist. I think that shows that creativity is more expansive and more encompassing than we may think it is. I think people try to like put creatives in like one category, but without really thinking
Right.
about creativity as a concept and how it could be put into anything. It could be put into tech, AI, it could be put into architecture. Obviously, like, come on. People think, okay, architecture is so technical, but it's still creative. You're still designing, you're still
Oh, for
constructing, you're
sure.
still
Oh,
crafting.
yeah.
So it's like when people think about technical stuff like that, even graphics, that is coding. I mean, it's still you're being creative with numbers, you're being creative with software solution. So I love the concept of your book. Now, can you tell me the main framework that you explain in the book, is it the two concepts that you raised before, wisdom and creativity itself?
Method. Yeah, it's method
Method,
and
method.
wisdom, yes. That
What do you
is
mean
the
by
start of
method?
it. Well, the whole thing, of course, because I've built a map, it's like a triangle that is diagrammed to show you how you can work on creativity, and it's split down the middle so
Hmm.
that you have method on one side, wisdom on the other.
Okay.
Then there's a line at the bottom, which is the barrier to the source at the bottom, which is the source of all of your creative energy. And if
Hmm.
you can find a way to break through that barrier, then the energy of the source comes up into the triangle. So the book does spend time just systematically talking about each aspect of the triangle of this map, this guide to creativity. And so you can learn how to, in wisdom, the main thing is learning how to see. And in method, the main thing is learning how things work. So if you can combine how things work in your art and craft to how see, in other words, how to have new eyes to see the world and to see art in your life, then you're on your way to a very creative journey.
That's really
And of
beautiful.
course, on the way, there's so many details to be explained, like in
Mm.
wisdom and in method. And in method, a very important thing is structure. It's like you were talking about architecture. Hey, architecture is so creative, and people are getting so creative about very technical things. So it's like structure seems to be something very technical, but if you're very creative about structure, then it can become a very creative thing. And
Yeah.
also just very boring things like plumbing, or electrical cords and stuff like that. There's so many creative ways to deal with them. So that's all method. And do you have the wisdom to deal with that method? How do you see? What do you see? And so working on how to see and what do you see, that is the way of strengthening your wisdom, because
Hmm.
wisdom is something hard to explain. And in fact, as I showed you, there's no real definition of it these days.
Yes. Okay. So when we talk about method, we definitely, and you say structure, method has to do with structure. You're definitely talking about habits that we can form to lead us to attain our creative goals, right? What
Yes,
sorts of
yes.
habits can one form? I mean, it obviously is general. Everybody has specific tailored ones. Well, what sort of general habits could one
Okay.
form?
Well, I would first say that a lot of habits you need to unform.
Hmm.
You need to first unlearn how you habitually do things and how habitually you look at the world, because normally the way we look at the world is not creative. And what I have found is that we actually put an excessive amount of labels on things. And labels, they're useful, right? I want to put a label on me and it says Stan Lai, you know. But what does that really mean? Then if we have a way of delabeling things and delabeling the way you look at people, the way you look at situations, relationships, then they're free. The people, the objects, like let's say I'm holding this mug in my hand. And if I don't look at it as a coffee cup or a mug, it could be anything. It can easily become a pencil holder. It can also, become, an architecture, a work, it could become a building. It could be anything. But you first have to find a way to take the label off. And if you can do that, then there's just so much creative things that can happen in your life. That's just one of the habits you have to unlearn.
I think that's a very good habit, if I'm being honest. And if we're supposed to talk about it relating to me, I would say that I have perfectionism as something that I wear that hinders my creative journey. Like I was thinking about painting, there are very long intervals that I have between starting a painting and completing it because of my perfectionism. I may have a very good day, but if I have a bad day, the next session, then I just stop for a while until I get that courage again. And I don't like that. So that's something that, yeah, definitely one could unlearn. But when you were talking about the triangle, wisdom on one side, method on one side, and barrier at the bottom, I do believe that this can also be posed as a barrier, right? Are there other barriers that are general that you find in most creatives or people, normal people?
Mm, for sure. I mean, perfectionism, is definitely a virtue, and it can be a real problem too. It could be an obstacle. As a painter, you probably don't have a deadline unless you have an exhibition coming up which needs 40 different pieces, and you only have 25, then you're going to have to start painting like crazy. If you don't have a deadline, we work in the theater, we have deadline all the time. I've worked on plays where the tickets are all sold out, and I don't even have a script yet. It's, like, really scary at times, What the thing is, though, is you need to you have to temper your perfectionism. I'm a perfectionist, but I've learned over the years that if some obstacle comes up that is insurmountable, is you're not gonna be able to beat it, you're gonna have to change your plans, and you're gonna have to change them quickly. And for a perfectionist, that is so hard to do and so hard to take. It's like in the middle of your painting, someone comes and says, "Sorry, the government has just banned blue, you know, so you cannot use blue in your painting." Oh, my god. And if you're a perfectionist, either you say, "Okay, I'm trashing this painting and it's never gonna be done," or you say, "Okay, let's change blue into brown, and who knows?" And you see, it's a double thing. Perfectionism is so important because as an artist, you do need to pay attention to every single detail, and you have to take care of every detail. That's why even though I've been working in the theater over 40 years, still every single time I come to technical rehearsal on stage and the final dress rehearsals, I'm doing everything. I'm giving very, very, precise notes, to the point where you might think I'm crazy. I'll be doing things like saying, "Okay, let's wait a moment. Tell me the number of the cue you just did. 12.3. Lighting cue 12.3 needs to be changed from 3.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds, and then the sound cue that's coming with it needs to be lengthened to 8 seconds. Okay, let's try it." And then they try it, and then adjust it again, and I can go on forever. It's just like, yes, you have to be a perfectionist, but you also have to know that if perfectionism is hindering you to making deadlines, then you're in trouble, because that's an existential question. That's, do you want your play to be performed, or do you want your art piece to be displayed? you know yes or no? Yes, then you have to compromise.
Thank you for that answer. Honestly, very nice. I think we should go back into plays and playwriting. What is it like? Like you write a play and then you direct it down to sound, down to lighting, because we're talking about 2.3 seconds. What? So you're in charge of all of that, including choreography, stage direction, props. Please tell me how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works. It's like I actually consider playwriting and directing to be one job and not two jobs.
I
So
can see that.
when I'm writing a play, I'm thinking very much about the directing aspect of it. And when I'm rehearsing it, also, sometimes I design the set myself. Sometimes I have very, very good, wonderful colleagues who do it. And lighting and projections and things are all very capable professionals who are doing it, costumes and everything. But often I like to control the scenic aspect of it, because scenic for the director, it's very important. Like if you write a scene, where is the scene? How many people are in it? Where on stage are they? How much space do they need? What are the props they need? You know better than most anybody else. As the writer yourself, you need a sofa in the scene, and then you're thinking, wait a minute, I can't get a sofa on there. So what? What do we do? Pretend there's a sofa? Okay, that's the way. Bring in a bench, or what? So you solve problems all along. Directing a play is solving problems, and solving the problems of the play. And if you're the playwright yourself, which is me, then it's a two-way street where you're actually you're actually negotiating with yourself, all these different things. But as a playwright, I think the play first is the most important thing, to be able to conceive of it, the structure of it, to be able to write in the details, the dialogue, everything. I'm working right now at this moment. In fact, when I'm done with the podcast, I'll still be getting back to my computer on this play called Descent.
Hmm.
So it's about two vagabonds on the street who claim that they have descended from the heavens and they're actually gods, So gods in the Chinese heaven, and it's a comedy,
Nice.
and they talk all about philosophy. They
Mm.
have come because they have been deemed insufficient as actors in the heavens. So the gods want them to come down to experience life and to
Wow.
understand more about the emotions of people. So they're observing people, they're observing life. Actually, today I'm stuck on some lines because the third character is a female big business woman, head of a huge conglomerate whose business is on the brink of falling into bankruptcy. And she asks them for their advice. It's a very funny scene because I don't know if you know, but in the Chinese world, if you go to a temple, you can ask for a divination. So,
Mm.
yeah, divination, you go pray to the god and say, "May I ask for this divination?" And then you throw these two. I don't know if you've seen them before. They're like crescent moons. You throw them on the ground, and if they come to a certain configuration, that means that you can ask the question. And then you ask the question, and then you get a poem. They're usually 60 different poems.
Mm.
So you get a poem. It's like you take a bamboo stick which has a number on it. Then you go and get the poem.
Wow.
And the poems are all uh, Viv, I'm sure you would love this stuff,
You know,
because
yes.
it's like it would say something like when the it's like a fortune cookie sort of. It's when the winds are calm, the boat goes well, and then it's something like after when winter comes, spring will be next. It's like so obvious, but at the same time, once you get that and you're looking at that and that's to many people, they're asking the most important questions of their lives. It's like, should I change this job? Or someone is sick, what's going to happen? Or this and that. And then you come up with these very abstract, but very also sort of folksy, sort of home, these words of wisdom. And then you figure out what to do with them. So in my play, what I'm doing is the woman is saying, so my company is in trouble. Please give me some words of advice. And the two of them, and remember, this is a comedy. They're going like, we don't understand business. I mean, up there, and he does business. So please let me know. Tell us. You mean like one of those poems? Yeah, yeah. Give me one of those poems. And they said, no, but we don't do that. I mean, like when we're on duty to give the poems, we just say anything we want. It's like if we feel good, we'll give you a good poem. If we feel lousy, we'll give you a terrible poem. And so she says, please give me a poem. So I've been writing that poem.
Okay.
When you were talking about nowhere, I really felt that because today, before the podcast, I was writing that poem, and I found that when you want to do something like this, it's not a question of writing a beautiful poem, but it's a question of knowing what you want to write. It's like what is the poem about? Are you sure you know? If you don't know, you have to empty your mind and figure out what exactly are you trying to say with this poem and how that relates to the whole play. So anyway, what I've come up with in translation for you is basically, let's see, what did I write? Um, the anything in this troubled world, or in this in Chinese, the word is unclean. In this unclean world, anything you gain or lose is just sand, is sand or mud. And then the
Huh?
second line is, you have to what's the word? You have to, like, what's the word when a dog, let's say when a dog when you the dog has water on it, and then it sort of, what's the word? Springs itself, or
Shakes itself
you have
like.
shake. Yeah, so you have to shake yourself to get rid of all of the sand, you know.
Hmm.
And then the real you will be exposed. Yeah. So
Ooh, I
that's the
like
point I'm
that.
writing for. Yeah.
Oh, and because I'm a symbology person, I'm going to tell you how I received it. So,
Okay.
labels, material possessions, status, everything in this world is sand. And if we,
Mhm.
accumulate that on our skin and we allow that to define us, we may not find ourselves going along the path that we're meant to in life. We may find ourselves confused. But if we shake it off, meaning that we're detached to all of these things, then our true self will reveal itself.
You got it. You got it. You got exactly. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So
Thank you.
I don't know if you agree with the presumption though that the world is dirty, that's unclean to
I
begin with.
didn't see it as dirt. I just saw it
Mhm.
as a figure of speech, like the way you would
Mm,
regard
mm,
dirt, like, okay, just clean this off. Like you're not really attached to dirt. I didn't see it as
mhm.
really being grimy, but just more of inconsequential or
In Chinese though, it also is a saying. It's like in Japanese you say like the floating world, like this dust, this world of dust, it's like
dust to
dust.
dust, ashes to ashes.
Yeah. Yes, yes. But more in the sense of dust as being unclean, it's like dirt.
Hmm.
Dirt.
Fair enough. Okay. I didn't pick up on that. But that makes sense though. I have to ask. I've always felt like Chinese culture is so rich, and I love the messages and themes that are addressed in certain films and shows that I've watched. Now, I wanted to ask you how, like you said, this play that you're working on called Descent,
Mhm,
they also discuss philosophies.
mhm.
How does your culture influence your writing? What do you naturally infuse when you're creating plays? That, kind of, let's say I'm a Nigerian person. If I watched it, I would feel connected to the culture, or I've learned more about the culture.
I think there's something about culture where some of it becomes very local, or you have things that in Chinese culture where maybe Viv, if you saw like let's say, some sort of a ritual at a Taoist temple, and you wouldn't understand it because you might feel something, but you wouldn't understand the details because they're so cultural and so specific to certain, people or times or whatever. And then it comes to a point where that ritual or that aspect of culture really transcends the local culture itself and becomes it
Yes.
goes into the universal realm. And that is when you and I can share things that totally it's the same because as humans we experience we get the same deal, let's put it that way. Come to life on earth, everyone has the same deal. You don't have a better deal than I do, or because we're here and we experience day and night and the four seasons, and we experience, birth and growing up and illness and death, and it's all the same. In the end, it's the same contract. And so we come up with different ways of expressing those aspects of the contract, but in the end, it's the same.
Thank you. Another question that I have for you. What
Sure.
inspires you, or how do you get inspiration for plays? And how long is your
Mm.
running time for most plays? Because you said the village was 3 hours.
Hmm. Dream Like a Dream is 8 hours, but normally it's 2 hours. Okay, I'm not. I'm not. I have another play called A Go is 5.5 hours, but normally it's 2 hours. Okay, and I don't. I try. And the crazy thing is, not too many people know this, but most of my plays, I find, because I've written so many of them, in performance, they usually come up to 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay.
On the dot. It's like every single play is about that long. Many of them.
Hmm.
So it surprises me. It still does, but I guess it's in the way. I guess if you paint and then you paint with a certain frame, then that frame is that big. It's not bigger or smaller. So how do I get inspired? Basically, I think it's life, and it's that you keep your antenna open and you keep. I do have a little secret that I like to share with you, and that is that to me, there's no hierarchy. Meaning that if you're looking for material for a new play or a new film or a new novel, not one thing is greater than another. Meaning you can have the story of a terrorist and bombing and whatever, and you can have a cup of coffee on the table. To me, they're the same. There's not like one thing can possibly be more better or higher than another. The story of kings and princes and queens and monsters, or the very simple story of a family, let's say in Taipei. They're equal. And to me, once they're equal, then as an artist, you walk out into the world every day and anything can inspire you.
Thank you for that. There's a question that I had on the tip of my tongue. Okay, yes, I remember. Your
Mhm.
plays, your writing process, are you
Mhm.
plot driven or character driven? And what message are you trying to convey
Mm.
in each of your plays to the audience? Do you have a central theme?
Okay, my plays actually all do not resemble each other, even though I've written so many of them. It's not like, you know, Chekhov wrote 4 major plays and they all look kind of the same with a sort of the same cast of characters, you know. Mine
Mm,
are quite different.
nice.
I don't plan it that way. I just that's just the way they are. And normally it's hard to say. Some of my plays are very character driven, some are very story driven, some are very structure driven. You
In
know,
what sense?
for instance, a play of mine called Circle Story. It's about so is I started with a structure, which is a love, not a triangle, but a love sort of cycle between like A and B. A loves B, okay, and they have a relationship. And then in the second scene, you see B and C. They have a relationship. Then the third scene, you see C and D, okay, and so it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it goes back to A. You know, so I started with a structure and then filled in all the blanks to make the play.
Interesting.
Sometimes it works that way.
Okay.
Normally, you know, to answer your question and to give it serious thought, normally it's a combination of everything. It just boom, it all comes together somehow. And to me, the important thing is, can I quickly identify or perceive whether this concept is going to work or not? Okay, because you can have a lot of ideas. Ideas, I must say, ideas are cheap. You know, they're it's really cheap to have an idea for a play or a film or a novel. But will it work? And that is something that needs a little wisdom. So if it doesn't, it's not going to work, and it won't work from day one. You really should not be pursuing this thing. But if you
Hmm.
know that it's going to work, then you work hard on it.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about your theater festival, Wuzhen Festival.
Oh,
How did it come
yes.
about? And how does one
Hmm.
create a theater festival? I'm asking because we literally just finished Lagos Theatre Festival. I've always been a theatre person. I love Broadway. I love theatre. I love plays. So that's a consistent part of my life. So when Lagos
All
was
right.
having its theatre festival, I was like, oh my goodness.
Mhm,
And what Lagos did was they were running at least like 20 shows a day. And they'd made this whole lawn as an event center. They'd made it into little pockets of us to watch
mhm,
separate plays, okay, with the
mhm,
main play inside the hall. And I found it
mm,
so amazing. I love festivals, but I found it
mhm,
so amazing. I was able to watch 2 plays. And I love when you watch a play. I don't know how it is when you do your plays because maybe the culture is different. Because in our plays, we're encouraged to talk, to chat, to insult the
mm.
character. We, in fact, audience talk
It's
to
great.
themselves. They exchange opinions while the play is going on. Do you get what I'm saying? And I forgot how much I love that until when
That's
we went
wild. I
last
love it.
weekend. It's
That's
so cool. You
wild.
find people chatting to
But
each other,
who
strangers,
gives you
you know?
who gives you
Yeah.
freedom to do that? I mean, how do you know you can do that and not offend the cast?
That is so true. I have no idea. It's just like a vibe. You feel it in the atmosphere. Because I'm telling you, I don't know why. You just feel like, okay, we can do this and get away with it. And we do. We chat, we shout, we chant. Nothing is like distracting to the actors, but
Oh,
we're in
that's
dialogue.
great.
Yeah. So someone in front of me can look at me and say, can you imagine? And I'm like, I know, right? And it's like, we're having, oh gosh, that's what I love
You
about the
know,
theater
you
in
really
Nigeria.
we I'm willing to say this publicly on your podcast, you know. Please get me in touch with the Lagos festival people.
I
Let's see what we can do, you
will.
know? Yeah, and I would love it if something you just described was in Wuzhen in China, and
Hmm.
the cast on stage encouraged the audience to react to everything and to shout at them, to talk to them or talk to them among yourselves. You got a Chinese audience to do that. That would be so liberating. It would be great. I
I
would
would
love that.
love that. I would love that. And I would love to
Let's
come
see if
from
that can
Wuzhen
happen.
Theatre Festival as well. So, you know what? I'm going to
Yeah.
do that. I'm going to do that. And then we'll see how it goes
All
from
right.
there. Yes, it should be
Okay. That
amazing because we've got some
and
South
if it
African
goes,
people.
uh-huh. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes, they came to do their play in
Uh, uh-huh.
Lagos, so that
Hmm.
was nice. So imagine like going as far as connecting to China and then bringing some of your
Yeah.
actors here to play to do some play. Trust me when I say that we
That
would
was
love that.
incredible. Wow,
Okay,
that would be incredible.
yeah,
Okay, so we've said this publicly. Let's make it happen,
let's
and
do it.
let's come back to the show and celebrate someday.
Yes, I love
Anyway,
that.
the Uzin Festival was founded by 4 of us, 4 friends, particularly the actor, the very famous actor Huang Lei. in China, and he's been performing in my place, Secret Love in Peach Blossom Land, for many years. And he said, "Listen, no, he's very good friends with this very special scenic spot called Wuzhen, and they
Mm.
want to do a theater festival. And can you help?" And so we went, and I saw it was mesmerizing. The town is like it's like a stage. It's like anywhere can become a performance, and
Wow.
it's built. It's like Venice. It's sort of like the Venice of China. And the head there, Mr. Chen, he said, "So what do we need if we want a theater festival?" And I said, "You need a theater. You need a theater that can work for anyone in the world. Like the top groups in the world will come and they can perform in this theater. And then any I can search the town for other places like warehouses we can make into theaters." And so we started in 2013 with a very modest theater festival, and soon it grew. And now we just finished also at the end a couple of weeks ago in Wuzhen. It was crazy. It was like it's like so many people coming, mostly from China, but
Yeah.
people because Wuzhen is an enclosed water town. So you go in, you don't have to come out. You don't have to get on a bus or any transportation. You just walk to everywhere,
That is
to
so
all the
cool.
theaters, and you meet the same people. You talk to people. You go to plays. You talk about plays. You have coffee. You have tea. Whatever. Good food. It's crazy. Someday you should come.
I would I would love that. I'm going to put that in my bucket list
Yeah.
because I love plays so much. And one
Yes.
thing about me, I'm not limited. I love different cultures. So I always enjoy my experiences anywhere. And that's something I want to do, definitely. Now, how many shows
I
do you
think there's yeah.
run? Sorry. What
Mhm.
did you say?
Oh, and Wuzhen. No. I was in Wuzhen. Well, we have very different many different categories. I would say 50 or 60. The past incarnation, we had about 60 different performances,
Wow.
plays.
Over
Yeah,
how long?
over 11 days. So
Wow.
that means productions, which each have two or three performances each. So there's a lot of a lot of ways to see shows, and also we have a lot of free theater on the street. So a lot happening. Yeah.
It's amazing. Wow.
Well, the toughest ticket at the Wuzhen Theatre Festival is called the Emerging Artists Competition, and the toughest ticket is free. You don't have to pay for it, but you have to wait in line for a whole night to
Oh,
be able
wow.
to get into this theater because the competition it's like so amazing. Is like this last year we've got 800 entries where we can only pick 18. And then they go through this competition. And finally, I'm the head of the jury, and then we see the final six performances, and then we give out three prizes, which are
Wow.
quite substantial in terms of money for a
Hmm.
young artist. I think it's about $10,000 US. I think
Oh,
the first prize,
wow.
uh, and yeah, and so it's like people they're just so revved up for this, young people in particular. And then we pay for them, each of these groups, to come to Uzan to rehearse and then to perform. So it's quite a big deal.
That's amazing, honestly. The last thing I'd love to ask you about is the Hui Chang Theatre Village.
Mhm.
How is that? What's that like?
That's different from Wuzhen. This is my
Yes.
father's hometown,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, it was an impoverished town in the south of China. I started 10 years ago by bringing my own productions back to my dad's hometown. My dad passed a long time ago when I was young, so I never had that many connections to his hometown. But I said, hopefully I can do something for them. So I started bringing plays, hoping that the kids there particularly could see something from the big cities, from international, stuff, and then see what would happen. Then the government there said, "Can you do something more?" And I said, "What does that mean?" And they said they have started to have this vision about creating this sort of ecology where we would have theaters, then we would have performances year round, where this town, which really had nothing, where all
Wow.
of the young people, their aspiration would be to go to the coast, which would be maybe like 6 hours away, and then find a factory job to sew Nike shoes or Levi's pants, and that would be it. That's their life, and then they make a little money and come back home and get married, and that's it. And how can we change a town like that to change its fate? So now we have the Huichang Theater Village, and every year we have a mini festival. And this year in May if you know theater, you know these names I'm gonna be saying. Robert Wilson, who passed away in July, but his last performance was in Huicang. And then the National Theatre of Greece came and did the Oresteia in front of my family's home. You know, it was so touching.
Wow.
Yeah,
This
and
is
I did a
amazing.
performance within my family's home. So
Oh, wow.
it's quite an experiment. Let's just put it that way. And people are noticing this place. It's like not at all on the scale of the Wuzhen Festival, but it's a nice complement to the Wuzhen Festival
Mm-hmm.
because you can see how it's we're building it to make it more for like to be able to build new works there, like artist residence, things like that, that we can make new works there that start there.
Thank you so much for everything that you've explained to me about creativity, about playwriting, about plays. I think this was the perfect time for us to have our podcast episode because of me going for Lagos Theatre Festival. It sort of reawakened something inside of me
No,
that made me
that's
remember how
great.
much I
Yeah.
love the culture, that made me remember how much I love theatre. Like I go for numerous plays a year.
Mhm.
It's part of my existence. You know what I'm saying? So I love the idea of talking about your plays, your approach to creativity, the culture in China, the Wuzhen Theatre Festival, the theatre village in Huichang, right? I love all of
Great.
that
Yes, very good.
because yeah, right? Because it sort of
Yes.
speaks of it's a celebration of culture, right? But I also love when
Mhm, mhm.
cultures come together. I love when we can create something by bringing our own things and then discussing. Because from us talking, we've exchanged ideas, but we've also decided that we have to move forward to bring a union between a union between Chinese culture and Lagos culture in terms of theater. And I think that's going to be a beautiful union.
Hey, that makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Let's make it happen.
I love that. Thank you so much, Stan. Listeners, if you thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, you can check out Stan's website in my show notes. We've spoken about creativity. And one thing that is important is for us to realize the beauty of that as a concept, because I talk about creativity a lot on this podcast. Stan has a book called CreativitRy, and you can find that on all bookstores. You'll find that in the show notes as well. My main message is for you to know that there's no limitation. You shouldn't allow any barriers to stop you from being a creative. Get his book. Immerse yourself in theater culture, listeners. If you're not a theater person, you should start going now because that's something that is really, really, really needed as a listener of this podcast. So if you thoroughly enjoyed this episode, please reach out to me on all social media platforms, Perspective with Viv. And like I said, I will link all of Stan's links and social media in my show notes. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Stan, for coming.
It's totally been my pleasure.
Yeah, it's been more of a pleasure because, like I said before, can you imagine one of the greatest playwrights in
Oh,
Asia?
please, not again. Hey,
Okay.
I'm just a guy doing what I think I should do. That's all, That's it.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for joining me. Take care. Bye.
Okay, you be well.
Thank you.